Do you want to learn how to study a language faster? You might have heard that in order to master something, you need 10,000 hours of practice. 10,000 hours at 3 hours per day works out to be about 10 years. So how is it that polyglots like this guy, Wim Hof, LL Zamenhof, 11 languages, and he created 2 new languages including Esperanto. John Paul II, he spoke 8 languages. Ho Chi Minh spoke 6 languages. Emil Krebs spoke 68 languages. And hundreds of other people with very busy lives have managed to learn not 2, not 3, but several. How did they do it? Hint. Certainly it wasn't by scrolling their social feeds. And even if one or more of these people had some outlier abilities, some crazy skills, their success had to leave a trail of clues for the rest of us to follow. Now, you may not be able to get rid of the accent that is affected by your native language. But if someone can learn 68 languages in their lifetime, then you can certainly learn at least 1 more or 2 more in a tiny fraction of the time. But why should you listen to me? Well, English is my second language and I feel like I've mastered it pretty well. And I'm currently studying my third language, which is Spanish. So I've decided to put together a video to extract some language learning lessons as well as synthesize them to form a language thesis from top performers and polyglots, etc. So today I'm going to teach you different study techniques, give you a framework, how you can apply this to anything you learn, and tell you about my #1 mistake in learning a language, actually learning in general, and set you on a trajectory to learn a language in as little time as possible. But first, what happens if you don't follow the advice I'm about to give you and don't design your language learning for efficiency? Well, you could end up like the hundreds of thousands of people who spend their entire education learning a language at school and passing all the tests they were given, and when they go on a holiday to a foreign country, do not say a single word in their second language. Possibly afraid of saying the wrong thing and feeling like they have to have the perfect language skills before they can speak. That's why figuring out a plan on how to study is so crucial and is going to set you on a trajectory for success. How can you learn as fast as possible? And how do you set the right foundation to increase the likelihood of success? Well, the framework I'm about to teach comes from best-selling author and polyglot Tim Ferriss. And there are 3 steps to this framework. You can use this framework to learn topics outside of language learning as well. Let me go into a little more detail about these steps. Step number 1, effectiveness. First, you want to figure out what is a good material to study. There is no point in studying if things aren't applicable to whatever you're studying. If you spend 10 years studying the wrong material, it will not matter how you study. And step number 2 is adherence. This step is the most crucial in my opinion. The best way I know to get things done is just to do them. Therefore, you want to figure out a way to make sure you come back to learn on a regular basis. Can you set up accountability partners? Make a bet with someone that if you don't study 20 days out of the month, you will donate $100 to charity. The thing I would say here is to start with a small amount of action, so it doesn't seem like this big thing you have to do. This used to be my Achilles heel of learning things. I'd wanted to start learning Spanish 15 years ago. I had only started after I removed all possible obstacles and made it as easy as possible. to learn for just 5 minutes per day, every day. I will tell you how I did it in the next section. And then step number 3 is efficiency. Once we know what we need to study, we have selected material that is interesting to us, and we have figured out a way to do it on a regular basis, we can go on to step number 3, efficiency. This one is important because even though we may have the materials and the adherence, if it takes us 30 years to learn something, we'll probably never start. There's a principle called the Pareto principle, and it states that 20% of effort brings us 80% of the results. So start with the most fundamental 20% of a language to learn to be 80% conversationally fluent. And Pareto is how we cut down 10,000 hours of mastery to much more manageable 2,000 hours. About 2 years if you study 3 hours per day, but I reckon it's probably less if you do it regularly. And how do we do that? With something like learning the top 1,000 most commonly spoken words. Or perhaps by using a simple and basic framework to grasp how a grammar in a certain language works and referring to that over and over again. Just having an A4 page that you just look at over and over again, while ignoring the rest of the 80% that's hugely complex. Once again, the 3 steps are effectiveness, adherence, and efficiency. We have established a framework for the language learning madness, but I'd like to help you to solve the problem of how to put that framework into practice and help you with different tools and techniques. The first one is the 5-minute rule, and it's part of adherence. There is no use in learning how to learn and selecting the best material to learn if you're not going to apply all of that knowledge. It's like learning to ride a bike by watching a YouTube video without actually going out and trying to have a go on the bike yourself. That's where the 5-minute rule comes in. The 5-minute rule has had an incredible impact on my work and study. In fact, if I was to select a thing that has had the most impact on my life over the past year or two, it would be the 5-minute rule. There have been so many times where I did not have the motivation to study or to go to do the work that I knew I wanted to do, where it would have been easier to just watch TV and scroll social media. All you want to do here is tell yourself you'll study just for 5 minutes. And if you don't feel like continuing your work or your studies, then just stop. What I've actually discovered is after I spent those 5 minutes working, I've realized that I forget about those 5 minutes altogether. And my feelings towards doing the thing have changed. And I just continue working more often than not. Sometimes I do stop, like when I'm really tired, I stop after 5 minutes. At least I gave it a shot. If you don't study a language regularly, set a habit to start. Even if it's just downloading the Duolingo app and using that once per day. You want to make it as easy as possible to do what's required. Duolingo is fantastic at teaching you that habit of learning every day, and it's great for the beginning stages of learning and beginning a habit. However, if for some reason you don't like that app, and I have met people who don't, and they don't like that cartoonish nature of it, I have something else for you. It is the chain calendar method, and it has 3 steps. Step number 1, print out a large calendar for the next month and stick it somewhere you can see it every day. Step number 2, every time you sit down to do your 5 minutes of language study, you put a big red X on the calendar. And step number 3, try not to have any days where the calendar is without the X. That's it. You'll find that once you start and have a few days in a row, it will be fun to keep the chain going, and it will be easier to sit down and do the thing. Now that we are deep into these techniques, you might be asking yourself, are these techniques really worth it? Or you might be doubting yourself, why even bother learning a language? And I'm telling you, there is no greater feeling than going to a barber in a foreign country and asking them to get a haircut in their native language. Even if your language isn't perfect. And besides, learning something like this, or an instrument, or another difficult skill, keeps your instrument sharp. There's a story supposedly popularized by Abraham Lincoln about these two lumberjacks who entered a wood chopping contest, the winner of which would be showered by gold and fame. And so both of these entered this contest and they set off to work, except one of them halfway through the day stopped and disappeared for about an hour, then returned and got back to work. And at the end of the day, the guy who disappeared had won by a huge amount. To which the guy who lost asked him, "Hang on, how did you do that?" And the guy who won answered, "Well, I disappeared, I had some food, and I sharpened my axe." The reason I'm telling you this is in order to be as effective as possible, you have to sharpen your axe and figure out the best way to learn. And with that, to the next point. Efficiency and reading. Maybe there's a topic that you enjoy learning about and you could maybe find a book in your target language on that topic and just read that. That way you just don't get bored of returning to the same book and trying to learn those new words. You can skim over, do several passes where the first pass you understand a little bit and then the next pass you understand more, and with each time you understand more and you're absorbing so much of the language. The way I used this tip without really knowing it when I was first learning to speak English was I would get back from school and throw my backpack in the corner of the bedroom and start watching Top Gear in English, obviously. My interest in cars fueled my language learning and sped up the learning process. So you can use your curiosity in a subject other than the language that you're trying to learn to fuel your language learning, and it will help you to keep going. The biggest level up in language learning happened to me in my early 20s when I dreamt that one day I would start a business and become an entrepreneur. I found out that to make that dream into a reality, I would need to read a lot of business-themed books. And when I first started, I struggled so much to get through the one book. I didn't understand like 30, maybe 35% of what was inside. Not only because of English, but because of the business knowledge. And there was a lot of new vocabulary. But the dream was so big that I just kept going. And I didn't translate everything that I didn't understand. But eventually, over time, I understood more and more. And now I absolutely love reading. 90%, 95% even of the books that I read are in English. And yes, I still enjoy a book in Polish from time to time just for fun, but English is the primary thing that I read. You might say, hang on, how can I read a book without knowing how to pronounce the words that I don't really know? Isn't that going to create bad speaking habits? Well, I actually have a solution. And this solution will not only ensure that you avoid bad pronunciation, it will actually increase how fast you remember things and make the process more entertaining. Gabe Weiner in the book Fluent Forever talks about the fact that the brain processes words on 4 different levels: structure, sound, concept, and personal connection. And so you want to connect a new language to these different levels. And the way you do that is by reading the book as well as listening to an audiobook at the same time. If you then pause for a moment and then think about how the book you're reading connects to your personal situation, your brain has more points to connect to this memory. And yeah, That is why complete immersion is very effective. And complete immersion, I mean like going to a country and speaking to everybody. Think about it. When you translate the word cookie from a foreign language, it's an abstract idea. When you look at the picture of a cookie and see the word galleta, your brain has two different points of reference. The word cookie and the picture. But when you bake a cookie in Spain or Mexico, you talk about galleta. You know the smell of galletas, and you have a personal experience of when you first baked galletas in Spain, along with that smell of the perfect galleta, the feel of the galleta dough in your hands, the taste of the galleta fresh out of the oven, and the smile of your girlfriend's face when she first tasted the galleta. The number of neural connections increases by a lot. And by extension, your memory retention increases. I want to tell you about a study technique, and it is one of the most effective techniques out there. This technique is called active recall. And active recall is an effective study technique where you actively stimulate memory during the learning process instead of just passively reading information and merely thinking about it. It could involve various methods like using flashcards like Anki, answering questions, or recalling information from memory without looking at the text that you were learning from. And this method has been shown to create stronger neuron connections and helps to improve the recall of information, making it a highly effective tool in learning, including language learning, of course. So instead of reading something and hoping it stays in your memory, in other words, putting stuff into your brain, try to retrieve it out of your memory. Try to remember an answer to a question. Try to remember the name of something. If you didn't remember, mark it down and return to it again quite soon. There are different tools for this. Duolingo is the beginner's tool. There's also just pen and paper. Write the questions on one side of the page and then answers on the other. And then cover up half the page and then go through the questions. See if you remember the answers. An even better method is using a program like Anki. And Anki is a powerful tool for implementing active recall in your study routine. It is a flashcard-based program that utilizes spaced repetition system to help you learn and remember information more efficiently. It's especially useful for language learning as you can create flashcards for new vocabulary words, phrases, or grammatical structures. And by regularly reviewing and recalling this information, you can significantly improve your memory retention. And what is great about Anki is if you don't remember the word that you are trying to learn, it will bring that word back within minutes of your last attempt and help you engrave this mistake into your brain. Also, a bonus tip, read out loud. Read out loud because the sound will connect to your visual memory. It will help you with learning pronunciation too. In fact, recording yourself is another great tip. You can listen to how you sound after you say something. You don't have to show it to anyone, but if you record yourself speak for 5 minutes on a topic you might be comfortable with, you will catch certain mistakes that you weren't previously aware of. This video has many concepts, and my goal is to help you level up instead of feeling overwhelmed. I urge you to note down at least one of these lessons that you've learned today and apply them to your language learning. At least try to do one, and if that works, come back and learn another. Just watch this video again. But step by step, you'll get good. When I did this thing many years ago when I read a book on language learning because I wanted to start learning Spanish. And after reading the book and learning a great many language learning techniques, I felt overwhelmed by all the steps that I needed to take. So I never got started learning, and yeah, that fell apart. Therefore, I urge you just to take one of these tips and just start. Please leave a comment down below which tip you found most useful or interesting. And write down a tip you're going to start implementing today. There's this principle out there as well called the fast, bad and wrong principle. Doesn't matter if you do it bad or wrong, just do it fast. Just start today and improve tomorrow. I have a bunch of videos of language learning, and check out that way.